It is normal for us to hear that to implement artificial intelligence in our business operations, we need first to invest in a good, solid data foundation. And is this true? And if so, why? Because if we are going to implement different types of artificial intelligence functionalities, machine learning, generative AI, or more recently going even through agentic architecture, do we always need to build a solid data foundation first? In today's video, we are going to challenge this idea. We are going to check the different use cases where we can apply artificial intelligence. And for each one of those use cases, we are going to analyze if indeed it is necessary or mandatory to have a good data foundation. Let's go. The field of artificial intelligence, and more recently machine learning, has been around for already some years. And one characteristic of those type of use cases is that most of them were built customized for a specific behavior in a certain business or requirement. So this means that the models that were used for those situations, they were trained on high volumes of data specific for that business. But in these last years, with the appearance of generative AI, these models became more generic in terms of the data set they use, because they are used more in a use case of context variation, where you need them to understand what is requested and adapt and act based on that request. This means that the data set that they were trained of is not specifically of that business, but it is generic based on the knowledge of internet or different data sets, so that they can have normal conversations, so that they can simulate human behavior. So this means that when we want to implement artificial intelligence in our business operations, first we need to evaluate what we want to do. What is the business value that we want to bring with the artificial intelligence requirements that we are implementing? Because if we are talking about use cases more close to the machine learning that we saw before this era of Gen AI, that in that case, most likely you will need to have a solid data background, because that data is going to be used directly to train a model. On the other hand, if you want to implement use cases more related with the functional business of your employees, for example, to replace a human activity or to perform an automatized validation on a website or in an application, then you need to evaluate which of the two we are more close to. Are you implementing a use case that requires a large amount of data organized in a specific way so that it can find new knowledge upon that data? Or are you using basically a small set of data and focus more the artificial intelligence use case into picking that data, performing certain analysis, reading, taking decisions and actions upon it? So it's all about the amount of data that the artificial intelligence needs in that specific use case. So let's start with the first scenario, where we need a more foundational use case for our AI. So let's pick here an example. Let's assume that there is a factory with an IoT implementation that gathers millions of data points or data sets every day regarding machines. And you want to use artificial intelligence to try to find common patterns, for example, for malfunctioning prediction or maintenance plans. So if you analyze this, you don't really need the artificial intelligence to make conversations or to replace somehow a human behavior, because it's very difficult for a human to process millions of data sets and try to find patterns on that. So most likely generative AI is not a good application here. You will most likely implement machine learning algorithms on top of that. But those machine learning algorithms, they will be trained upon the data that is produced by the sensors. So it's not an existing model, LLM model, that you will be using, but instead a machine learning trained from the ground. So this means that the quality of the model depends directly on the quality of your data. So if you do not have your IoT data or sensors data well organized so that it can be easily fetched and aggregated or to perform operations on that data, it will be difficult for you to achieve a good quality of the model. So in that case, yes, you should invest on building a good data foundation. Let's see another example. Imagine that you have your CRM system and all the data related with your customers, but also in this case, sales, orders, products is somewhere in the system. And you want to use AI to find patterns, to do analytic operations on top of that, to find situations related with sales, with the products that have better sales, try to find patterns in the sales orders itself. So in this case, again, the artificial intelligence is built on top of your data, customized data, not to talk with a human or to perform a sort of an operation on an application, but to work in the background using highly amounts of information to try to find patterns. So again, this machine learning algorithm or model, he will need to be trained upon that data. But now let's look into the other side. Imagine that in your company you do have systems. You have a CRM system, you have an ERP system, you have a product management software, and all those systems, they do have APIs, for example, where you can fetch data or perform operations. You can create a product, you can create a sales order, you can update a client. And you need to create an artificial use case to perform those types of operations in those systems. Coming, for example, from an email. If we receive an email that asks to create a sales order with this, and this information, we want to have an artificial intelligence. We want to have an agent acting upon that email and calling the API to create the sales order. So in this case, if you see, the quality of the model is not related with the amount of data that you have on the sales application. So it doesn't matter the amount of data that you have there, because what you need is the model to act a bit like a human. So you need the model to have a context variation, to receive an email, read the email, understand that this is a sales order, and because of that, he needs to call the API to create that sales order. Or for example, if he receives an email from a client asking for some details on a certain order, he might understand that he needs to call a GET API from the system to feed that information to the client. So you see that for these types of use cases, AI is replacing more a human behavior. He is not doing an analysis of the data set that exists underneath it. He is simply performing direct operations that do not require large amounts of data. And so for those situations, generative AI is a good use case. An agentic architecture is a good use case and for those situations. And if you have a good API integration between the different systems, then you don't need to have a solid background information to make it work. Because if the data on those systems is not with good quality, that is not a problem of implementing AI, because that problem also affects the human. So if you want to improve the quality of that data, it's not because of AI, but it's because of the generic issue that you have with the quality of that data. So you have that opposite situation where you don't need to have a good data foundation. So it all depends on the use cases. So no, it's not mandatory for you to invest first on a solid data foundation to implement artificial intelligence use cases, because it always depends on the use case you want. I hope that this video could help you evaluating the use cases you want to use in your business operations, and that it could help you defining a better roadmap for your AI strategy. Follow me for more videos related with this topic. Have a great day.